Hello and welcome to part 2. If you haven't watched part 1 about the upper assembly, I suggest you do that, and in today's video it's all about the lower and the other parts related to that. So let's get started. So here's the lower with all the nice markings, the pistol grip, position stock. Here's the other side, the inside, I'm very proud about how realistic all this looks, and I will explain why. So starting off with the back, here we have the two-position buffer tube. The stock is a aluminum one with a vinyl finish on it, like the real one. That's an Ace Essential brand made assembly. That's a very good alternative because the original Colt ones are very hard to get or just simply very expensive. Only thing I don't really like about the Ace Essential is the color of the buffer tube. It's rather black than grayish. It should be a more grayish color like this nut and end plate. So I have ordered a two-position buffer tube that should have a very close looks to the original Colt gray buffer tube. Should arrive soon, and I will install it as soon as it arrives. Now the pistol grip is a vintage 80s made, I believe, Colt. I need to check that, but it's original and vintage from the 80s. The receiver is a vintage Colt receiver from the 70s. It has its original finish on it. This part here, trigger guard, is also original 70s Colt. Magazine catch as well, selector also. The firing control group, vintage Colt. All the other parts, receiver pins, detents, springs, everything is vintage Colt. The bolt catch is airsoft. That's a steel Vipertech one. That's the only one that can work on such a build. And as you can see, underneath is the valve knocker, which opens the valve on the magazine. I will get into that in a bit. And the last part I need to cover is the things that are inside the buffer tube. So give me a second, I will take this out and talk more about that. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the spring. I'm using a vintage Colt spring. That's a real buffer spring. Yes, I had to cut it down a little bit. I was testing the full length. That it worked, but it was just too strong and I was afraid it would lead to breaking the bolt carrier or some other parts. So I have weakened it a little bit by cutting it, and now this length is perfect. This is it. The other thing is the buffer. That's a real steel buffer. At first I've used it without the weights inside, but of recently I've decided to test it with the weights inside, and I can tell you the kick is awesome. the complete system works much better. The last thing here is this spacer, or if you will, some will call it buffer. At first I have used the usual rubber spacers that go in the back of the buffer tube. For you who aren't familiar why these spacers or buffers are used, is simply to restrict how far back the bolt carrier group can go into the buffer tube. The reason for that is simply to restrict that the bolt carrier group goes too far back. When you shoot the last round, the bolt catch will go up and will catch the bolt carrier. So if you don't have any spaces in the buffer, let's pretend this is the bolt carrier group, okay? The bolt carrier group will go like that far, pretty far back, and it will have enough time to accelerate, create momentum, and build up speed, and then slam like crazy on the bolt catch. This will lead eventually to the breaking of the bolt catch. Okay? To prevent that, we use spacers, and we restrict how far back the bolt carrier group goes, and the ideal way is to have it stop like millimeter or two behind the bolt catch. Now when the spring pushes the bolt carrier to the front, it has not enough space, room and time to accelerate and to actually hit like crazy on the bolt catch. So what happens is this. It has force because of the strength of the spring, but that's not the problem. The acceleration and the slam into that is the actual problem. So you need to try to accomplish this distance. Test it. If need be, you can go a little back depending on how fast your bolt catch can jump up to catch actually the bolt carrier group. Okay, this is something you need to take care of, especially when you're using a very hard spring. I think I have covered the essentials about this part here. Now let's take a closer look on the fire control group here. As I have said, this is all vintage Colt, and let me show you a picture of it. As you have maybe noticed, the hammer spring looks a little bit different. I have used the original spring, but I had to bend the legs of the spring. In its original shape, the legs of the spring are straight. I had to bend them in an angle, as you have seen. Reason is to weaken it a little bit. The spring is still strong, and it needs to be strong in order to open up the CO2 magazine valve. If I had kept it in its original shape, it works, but it makes a lot more stress on the other parts. Steel hammer and the bolt carrier riding on it, it just wears out the bolt carrier too fast. So you will need to weaken the spring a little bit, but still keep it strong in order to have the system work properly. The last thing to address here is the valve knocker. This is a custom-made part, and now I will blend in a picture of it. It consists of the knocker itself, the knocker return spring, and the knocker retention. I just call it like that. So I managed to redesign that. You may find this very similar to the knocker that was done by Real Fake Guns when he was converting his M16A1. That's true. I have based my design on this one. I didn't modify the hammer like Real Fake Guns did, and well, if you compare, you will see the differences. What was the most stressful part in building the lower? Well, it was drilling the hole. Drilling the hole for the knocker was the most stressful part. The most stressful 20 minutes. You get just one shot to do it right. If you get it wrong, you can throw away the lower. Well, I gave it a lot of thoughts before attempting to drill it. I had to buy a special drill for it, 4mm, very long drill, and it goes from here in an angle inside this to drill it. I'm very happy it worked out well. Since then it works perfectly. I'm very happy with the complete build of the lower. As I said, I will change out the buffer tube, and maybe if I get lucky to get the original Colt buffer tube, that would be awesome to add to this build. Maybe someday in the future, we'll see, but for now I'm very happy with the outcome. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and this is it for today's video. I hope you found it informative, and see you in part 3, where I will cover the magazines I'm using, the Devil Hunter mode, and the complete system you need to actually run your gun like that. So, thank you for joining me in this video, and have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.